Hi everyone, my name is Vanessa and I'm the CEO here for the Geelong Regional Library Corporation, and I'm delighted to welcome you all to our World Poetry Day celebration this evening. Thank you. I'd like to acknowledge the Wadawurrung people of the Kulin Nation and the Gulajan and the Gadabanud peoples of the Maar Nations. As the original owners of the lands on which our library services operate, this library is on Wadawurrung country. We pay respect to elders past, present and emerging, and we acknowledge and celebrate First Nations peoples of this land as the custodians of learning, literacy, knowledge and story. And I'd also like to let you know that tonight's event is being recorded and will be available to view on demand through our YouTube channel if you'd like to watch it again or share it with your friends and family. And it is being shot from the back, so it is just the backs of your heads that are captured, but please catch up with Gillian or any of our other team if you have concerns. Apart from you, of course, you'll be the stars of the show. World Poetry Day is one of our key annual events and one that we value as a way to show support for the many talented poets of this region. We really are very fortunate. Poetry, like music, is an ancient and universal art form, and tonight we'll be pondering what the changes in technology and cultural practices mean for the future of poetry. We are joined by poets Heather Cameron, Alex Creece, Joshua Maxwell de Hoog and Cameron Lowe to discuss this topic. And we will enjoy a break with refreshments halfway through the evening, as well as some very special announcements later in the night for our Poetry Prize. And I'd just like to acknowledge and thank Deakin University because they have been the sponsor of our Poetry Prize, and this is the last year that they will be supporting the prize. So thank you to them. And equally, if you do know an organisation or a person who's particularly passionate about poetry, we'd love to talk to them about the prize moving forward. So thank you to Deakin. And that leads me to obviously thanking our MC for the evening, himself a poet of very high regard, Professor David McCooey. And David is a prize-winning poet, critic and editor. His latest collection of poems, The Book of Falling, was published by Upswell in 2023. And David is, of course, the Professor of Writing and Literature at Deakin. And again, we really value that relationship with the Creative Writing School at Deakin University. Please join me now in welcoming David McCooey.
Thank you very much, Vanessa. I won't say any more about what's going on at Deakin. So we're here to talk about, at least for this part of tonight, the future of poetry. And 30 years ago, the future of poetry was largely apparent decline. The dropping of poetry lists by mainstream publishers, the slow disappearance of poetry from newspapers, but also the rise, perhaps, of pub poetry and verse novels. The World Wide Web was meant to save poetry, and perhaps it did to some extent. And as those earlier days show, it's very easy to strike a melancholy tone when it comes to poetry and mainstream culture. Perhaps the assumption that poetry and mainstream culture should go together is a problem to begin with, or perhaps not. These are the kinds of things that we might talk about tonight. So, to use a bit of corporatese, we're going to consider the future of poetry as both a challenge and an opportunity. But before we do, I will just introduce our guests a little more for tonight. Heather Cameron is a poet with an interest in autopathography and elegy, and she has worked in healthcare for many years, which has led her to write poetry around the themes of illness, loss and grief, and her published works include A Random Caller, Cancer Poetry, which is published by Ginninderra Press. And Heather has lived in Victoria, she tells us, for the same number of decades that she lived in her birth country of Aotearoa. And she says she currently lives with 2 cats who, despite not earning an income, are in charge of the household. I can understand that kind of cat. Cameron is the author of 3 book-length collections of poetry, Porch Music from Whitmore Press and Circle Work and Blink from Puncher and Watman, the last of which, or the latter, was launched just up the road on Sunday. His poems have appeared in anthologies such as 30 Australian Poems, Contemporary Australian Poetry, and Homings and Departures, selected poems from contemporary China and Australia. And he lives in Geelong, where he was born, with his partner, their daughter, and a ginger cat, but he didn't say anything about how bossy that cat is. Joshua Maxwell de Hoog is a co-founder of the local spoken word event Lowercase Poetry, which rather cleverly is all lowercase, which has been running just shy of 9 years, and alongside the organisation and involvement with Lowercase, Joshua has also published work in various anthologies, multiple self-published books, has undertaken poetry collaborations with Deakin, local musicians, and has been teaching poetry-adjacent workshops with many not-for-profit and community groups throughout the last 10 years. And they have shared their works in spoken word events around Australia and internationally. Seem to be going back and forward. Alex Creece is a writer, editor, artist, and apparently average kook living in Wadawurrung land. Alex works in editorial roles for Archer Magazine, Cordite Poetry Review and Sunder Journal. Her writing has been shortlisted for a whole host of things, including the Cat Musket Fellowship, the Next Chapter Scheme, the Geelong Writers' Prize, the Bourne Writers' Award, the Gwen Harwood Poetry Prize, and the Lord Mayor's Creative Writing Award. Alex is the author of Potty Mouth, great title, from Cordite Books last year, which was a highly commended runner-up in the Five Islands Poetry Prize. Now, enough biographies. What we're going to do now is each poet is going to read a poem, and then we will have our chat. So I'm going to sit down now and ask Heather to start reading.
I wasn't ready for that. I've got to change the glasses. I was thinking about the topic tonight and the future of poetry and the impact of AI and those sorts of things. And I thought I'd read a poem that has a little bit of a satirical, comical dig at myself. For those of you who have had cancer or who are living with cancer, you may know that one of the most fearful things about it is, once you've finished all your treatment, is the fear of reoccurrence. This poem is called Fear. The Voltaren has kicked in, back pain has eased. Still, remember the oncologist said the pain to watch out for was the one that woke me in the night? Osteosarcoma? First signs are bone tenderness. Can't feel a tumour though, like Dr. Google said I might. Migraine has passed, thank God. Nauseous though. Maybe I don't have a glioblastoma. Still, I've ticked the first 4 signs of it. No incontinence though. And this unbalanced sensation could be that vestibular disequilibrium, like they said. This damn black freckle. Oh, washed off. Dirt. Melanoma wouldn't surprise me. All that baby oil just to look cool in my teenage tanned skin. Still, these freckles do look darker, and this one is rough. My father had skin cancer, but not the hereditary one. Blood tests came back normal, just fatigued. Wasn't fatigue the first sign that Eve's husband noted? Myeloid leukemia? Or was it lymphoma? He bled though. That cut on my hand is healed, no bruising. Still, it did really bleed. No, perhaps not that much.
Thank you. Thank you, Heather. Yes, it's hard to know whether to laugh or cry. Next up, Cameron.
Hello. I just realised that as I did at the launch actually, that I forgot to bring my glasses tonight. No, it's okay. I'll just hold it back like this. The poem I'm going to read is titled Days, and it's the last poem in my recently published book. And I guess the reason for choosing to read it tonight, perhaps twofold. One is it's the last poem that I've actually written. And also, it's a poem about poetry in its own way. I don't really like talking too much to poems. I kind of feel like they should stand on their own feet. However, there are a few names appear in this poem. The Williams that is referenced is William Carlos Williams, the American modernist poet. Rakoczy is Carl Rakoczy, George Oppen. They're both American poets as well. I don't think it matters that if you're not familiar with their work. I guess part of the reason that they appear in the poem is I like the idea that, and here I am explaining the poem. I do like the idea that poems come out of a kind of community of poetry as opposed to this singular voice that is sometimes a popular conception of the poet figure. And now I will shut up and read the poem. Days. Oh, there's another name in it actually. Kit. That's my grandmother who has passed away. Days. 7 years since I read Williams' The Rewaking at Kit's funeral. Spring rekindled, the sun itself revived by love. Thought of it today, reading Rakoczy's George Oppen, The Last Days. Elegy for one who upheld the integrity of nouns. We seldom speak of such things. Never mind. The point, if there is one, I'll let you decide. Let me turn once more to Rakoczy. Cellist, easy on that bow. Thank you.
Thank you, Cameron. Joshua, want to read us your poem?
I wanted to bring a poem to you about the future. This isn't about the future of poetry, but it's about the grim future of a world in which we work.
And I think the soundtrack is kind of appropriate at this point.
Potentially. Yeah, a world in which we work to live other people's lives and not our own. I don't mind the sirens, please. I coerced them to go now, so it's all planned. Just as seeing isn't scrolling, so too dreaming isn't speech. It's the leading prayers to water, working Sundays till they meet. It's the cockatiel in its cage on that house upon the corner. It's the safety of this neighbourhood which, in its silence, never sleeps. It's those who live the dreamscapes of those others who let their days turn into weeks. Oh, the slumber of the should-haves, and the mercy of the would-haves, and the cries of the could-haves. It's the house on the corner with the cockatiel in its cage. It's the restless nights and household fights and overflowing ashtrays. It's all those things I'll never live, but somehow still make it to the page. Just as scrolling isn't seeing, so too speaking isn't dreams. It's the cliche blood. It's the cliche sweat. It's even the cliche tears. It's in forbidden memory of those who let their weeks turn into years. It's a bottle of tawny, a bag of chips, a cyst behind your ear. It's 23 carefully constructed reasons as to why to live in fear. It's a rusty nail in your nail bed, pinning hands to rotting coffins. It's dotted I's, but it never got so far to see the T's with crosses. It's the cage with the cockatiel on that house upon the corner. There's a wooden floor below those carpets. There's a path below those weeds. Just as seeing isn't scrolling, so too dreaming isn't speech. It's the safety of a neighbourhood that works Sundays till they meet.
Thank you very much, Joshua. Alex?
Yes, thank you. I chose this poem because it's roughly 2 to 3 minutes long, and that was the time allotted to me. And I'm going to do a trick, which is trying to hold 2 things at once. So thank you for bearing with me. My poem is called Birth Control Dyke. Butter me up with hormone heresy. Butter me up, butter fuck, so I don't get battered in the street. Consequences evaporate like dormant funnel webs in crumpets, doubling, bubbling, toilet troubles, 2-minute eternity in a piss-fingered cubicle where our futures sweat with, well, okay, maybe it's ghee. Butter me up with a bulletproof body. Butter me up, butter cuck, so I don't have to beg when they spread me for breakfast, threatening incontinence and plumbing a pipe dream. Just let me avoid the medical bill and Thanksgiving butterball of predators on parole. But you still want your bread and butter from contraceptive camouflage and low-rent lesbians. Butter me up with barrenness, baste me without excuses that still melt in your gob, buttering, spluttering, uttering that I am paranoid by delusion turned destiny, hysterical for hysterectomy, tongue-tied or tubular. Lather us, smother us, mother, unmother us. Drape your witch tits in cabbage to lactate, leaky, lucked out, or just butter me up, buttercup. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alex. I'll never look at the Western Star the same again in the fridge. Before we talk about anything else with regard to the future of poetry, and this is completely without notice, so if you have no opinions on this, that's fine. But I thought we would think a little bit about one particular future of Australian poetry which seems to be definite, which is that the federal government has committed to establishing a poet laureate this year. So I wondered whether the panel had any thoughts about that, whether they thought it was a good thing, a bad thing, anything that you might have to say would be of interest. As I say, this is all without notice, so...
Can I say something even though I just talked for 2 to 3 minutes?
Of course you can.
I feel like I was originally excited about the idea of a poet laureate, but I feel like there is a lot of political meddling in the arts and censorship in the arts, and I would say that that has turned me a bit bitter towards the idea of a poet who can actually write and speak freely about what they want to discuss.
That's a popular opinion. Anyone else?
Look, I agree, but I also think that a poet laureate brings poetry into the public domain. It brings exposure that perhaps some people wouldn't have access to poetry unless it was through the types of activities that a poet laureate might conduct. I can see good things happening, like getting more poetry into our education system. I think when I look at other countries that have got poet laureates, I can see how successful some of the projects have been that have come from the poet laureate. So I think it is fraught with some complexity. Whoever's appointed is not going to meet everyone's needs. You know, you may not even like that particular poet, but that's the beauty of poetry, isn't it? We've got 5 incredibly different poets on the stage here, but we respect each other, and I think that a poet laureate is something that would encourage more respect for poetry.
Yeah, that's a nice way of looking at it too. Yeah, thank you. Any other opinions? You don't have to have an opinion.
I have very little opinion and also very little interest. I would love to see a government that doesn't take anything more from the people. And I think poetry's for the people, and I think the government's for the cowards. So let it be.
Is our local member here today? That's a shame. Cameron, no opinion?
I don't really know what to say. I guess we had an unofficial poet laureate for many years, and he was a pretty controversial figure.
You're talking about Les Murray, I presume.
I'm talking about Les Murray. On the one hand, his writing has, for some people, is much loved. I know you have written a lot about his work, but he's also drawn quite a lot of criticism for some of the political positions within his work. Do I care if there's a poet laureate? I'm not sure that it really changes my...
Would you like to be a poet laureate?
No, I wouldn't want to be a poet laureate.
I think it'd be a terrible job, actually.
I guess I can see positives for it, as Heather has suggested. And I think it depends very much on who you're choosing for the role. And off the top of my head, I can't think who I would want to have in that role, but when did this get announced?
An Indigenous poet, perhaps?
Well, yeah, that would be heading in the right direction, wouldn't it? Because inevitably, I think it's going to be a politicised role. I don't see how it can't be. So who fills that role becomes, I guess, quite a political figure, whether they want to be or not. Sorry, I'm talking too long, but my understanding of it within Britain is that it sometimes is seen in a negative light, that it becomes a kind of nationalising sort of poet role. Is that good? I don't know. I guess it depends on what you think the poet figure should be doing.
Yeah, I mean, there are different ways of setting it up, as Heather suggested, and I mean, the poet laureate in the UK is, of course, I mean, basically hired by the monarchy, I'm pretty sure. Gets a barrel of alcohol or something every year. But there are different roles. I mean, there's the national maker, a maker being a medieval word for poet in Scotland, for instance, which I think is, quite a different situation. But we probably rehearsed the whole poet laureate thing enough. It might be time to move on, unless people are burning to add to this topic. I mean, in terms of, you can talk about whatever you want, and I would like to know what your personal thoughts are as to what you would like the future of poetry to be. But before we get on to that, maybe we could tick off a few sort of, a bit of an possibly obvious shopping list of things. But obviously, I mean, it's already been name checked. But Gen AI is a thing that people in the arts are thinking and talking about, and the CEO of ChatGPT recently claimed that, they've got to the point where, the software or the algorithm or whatever it is can write a high standard short story in this case. It was a metafictional work, which Jeanette Winterson thought was a great story, the British novelist. Obviously, people will have different opinions as to whether or not the work was worthy of praise. But, I mean, in many ways, poetry has been in the space of computers for decades, because poetry is a recombinant thing it recombines pre-existing things, forms and images and so forth. So at some level, it's kind of a natural fit with computers. But I'm going to stop talking in a minute. Do we have any thoughts, strong feelings about whether or where we should go with Gen AI and poetry?
I'm really interested in the resistance toward AI, and I think there's some interesting technology coming out in that field, especially that seems attractive potentially to poets. Things like laptops that don't have any data tracking, generating digital modes of typewriters that we can still continue to produce and share poetry between us and friends and lovers and wherever poetry goes, without it influencing AI. And I think that companies that are paying particular interest to that are really attractive to me. But I can only view AI from the point of resistance.
Yeah, yep. What does the rest of the panel think?
I have a lot of feelings about AI. I don't use it for myself, and I'm very anxious about it boiling the ocean and all the nasty shit it's doing to the environment. I will say that, I really I do find that some people, it can be, it can add some accessibility accommodations in terms of, if someone, for example, has dyslexia and finds it really hard to write an email, that can be a really useful tool for them. So I feel reluctant to be it's an absolute bad when I know that some people get some good things out of it, but I'm really anti-AI, especially in the creative space. I think I feel quite sensitive to it as well, because people do sometimes ask me if I use AI in my creative work, just because I'm not great at expressing things like a human at the best of times. So people are like, oh, did a robot do that? And it's like, no, I'm just awkward. But yeah, I just sort of feel strongly as a writer that it's I can also get stoned and write misinformation. I don't need a computer to do that for me.
Yeah, maybe that should be put on a T-shirt. I like that. What about at this end? Heather?
Well, because I'm such a compliant, good person, I used AI and asked them before I came tonight, what's the future of AI and poetry? Look, I use AI all the time. I don't when I'm writing poetry, but I do in my day job. And I've been really intrigued about the relationship that you can set up with your AI. I think there's a whole PhD in that. But what it said to me, what ChatGPT said to me was that when photography first came out, a lot of people said, well, that's the end of portraiture, that's the end of painting. And in fact, what happened was photography developed as an art form, and painting experienced the impact of photography and developed new genres of art form, of painting. And I was thinking, well, actually, that's really good. I mean, is this ChatGPT trying to tell me that I'm okay, you can still love me, or I'm not quite sure. I think at the end of the day, poetry means different things to different people, but essentially, I think as human beings, we're looking for meaning. We're looking for meaning in our lives, and poetry often gives that to us. It often gives us the words to describe how we're feeling, or what's happening in our lives, or it gives us tips and tricks for how other people have lived their lives. So I don't think AI will ever replace the human poet. I just think it will impact on it, and there may be new genres that develop from it. I suspect that that's what's going to happen, but I am an eternal optimist, so I don't know, maybe it'll destroy the world.
That wasn't very optimistic.
Oh, I'm just trying to be balanced.
I think I heard one interesting quote around AI and writing, and I'm going to butcher it, but basically the framework of the quote was, we should be designing AI to cook and clean for us so we can write and paint more, not AI to write and paint for us so we can cook and clean more.
Yeah, I agree with that. Cameron, do you have anything on this?
I guess I would pick up on what Alex was saying. The environmental impact of AI as it stands at the moment is pretty, it's pretty concerning. If you're intending to use AI as a writing tool, then I think ethically that becomes something to think about. But having said that, I mean, it's a technology. Writers employ technology, have done so for many years. I was thinking this afternoon about the late Australian poet John Tranter, who used, I think, a program called Breakdown to generate quite a lot of his work, or later work. So it's not as if it's exactly new to be employing these kind of technologies to produce poetry. But I guess for me, I think, I don't really know where I stand on it, to be honest. And I don't know where I see it going either. But I do think beyond writing itself, it raises a lot of ethical issues for us as human beings.
Yeah, thank you for that. Some of those Tranter poems are terrific too, actually. Yeah. Though, I mean, I guess it's a different thing. I don't want to get too technical here, in as much as it wasn't generating text per se, it was recombining text, and then the poet could do with it what he wanted here in this case.
Sorry, I guess I was talking about the technology being employed.
And I think that is something worth keeping in mind, is, well, how do you use it? Is it going to be just write a poem, and here's my book of poems, and I wrote 5 books this week, or is it going to be used in a more creative fashion? But I'll just move on, because we've talked about a number of things which I think pertain to a couple of themes which I think are relevant to the future of poetry. Resistance has come up. I was reading an article by the Canberra poet Paul Hetherington the other day in the Conversation about the popularity of poetry. He was making the point, as many have, that poetry used to be much more popular. Songs for a Sentimental Bloke, which came out in 1915 or something, it was a huge bestseller. And poetry used to be in the Bulletin and in newspapers, etc., etc. So there's kind of two responses to that, I think. One is, we can get back to a position where poetry is more of a mainstream discourse, and it will be back in our schools, it'll be back in our mainstream media. And then there's another way of looking at it, which is, well, no, why does it have to be there? We can be outside that space, and being outside that space is actually a liberating thing. And if the major publishers don't want to play with us, that's not a problem. I don't think that we're necessarily going to solve this problem, but or issue, or whatever you want to call it. But does anyone have any thoughts about where they sit with that kind of tension, whether it's an interesting tension, anything really, I suppose, to do with that vis-a-vis poetry's future? That might be one of those questions that I ask in a tutorial that gets dead silence. So. But Joshua, if you had something.
Can you reframe the question? It's pretty esoteric.
It's a bit too vague, is it?
Well,
okay. Well,
you can answer in so many ways.
I'm happy with any number of ways, but I will rephrase if you want.
Well, I'm happy to answer in one of those many ways. I think everyone should have access to poetry. I think all young people should learn the skills to express what they're feeling. So I think it needs to exist in the mainstream in that sense. Does it need to exist in the mainstream as something that is lauded and applauded as some sort of great skill? I don't think necessarily. I think poetry is a connection between the writer and the reader. I think it's served its beauty at that moment, and anything beyond that is, frivolous, really, in my opinion.
Anyone be able to follow up on that? I think that's a terrific articulation.
I agree. I think poetry should be for everyone. Interestingly, on social media, I spend quite a lot of time on LinkedIn, and there's a lot of poetry on LinkedIn. There's groups that have a poem every week that they post. There's groups that are particular fan bases of well-known poets. I follow Mary Oliver's fan group because I love her poetry. Poetry is out there, and I think I was thinking about Ursula Le Guin, the American writer. She made an amazing speech in 2014 when she received an award, and she said that in this society that we live in now, we need people who can remind us about what freedom is. And she was talking about writers and poets. And so I think young people respond to poetry because that's the kind of thing they're interested in, is how to manage this incredibly complex world that we're living in. So, yes, I think poetry should be accessible to everyone. How to do that, I'm not sure. I mean, I'm old enough to remember having to stand up in class and recite a poem. I mean, that's what everyone did. I can remember at the age of 6, our teacher reading us The Highwayman by Alfred Noyes, which is actually a poem about a woman who shoots herself to warn her outlaw partner that the redcoats are there waiting for him. I mean, we were 6 and 7 years old, but we loved that poem. And we used to ride the horse as the highwayman came riding. That's the kind of thing poetry can do for people. And that's what I think we need to open the doors to, is to have poetry in every part of society that we can get it into.
You're here. Yeah. Anything else from the panel on this?
I've got one more extension. I know I've spoken a lot, but I think there is some voices that need to be amplified. I think if we're thinking about poetry entering the mainstream, then there is marginalised voices that need to be heard by the masses, because there are people suffering in this country, and there is an ignorance shown toward them, and their lived experience shared through poetry might just be enough to captivate and change the minds of those in power.
Yeah, that's a lovely thought too. There's a question of the how on that one, but I'd like to come back to the other two speakers if they had anything they wanted to add on this topic.
So I've kind of lost track of what the original question was, but I'm just going to talk, and I've let it percolate. I think I'm sort of probably sitting in a similar kind of stance as Joshua. Definitely about amplifying marginalised voices is so important, but also I think people having access to poetry and poetry being something that is encouraged is really important, but kind of divorcing that from the idea of it being like a necessarily lucrative thing. Like, I don't really care if, it's never something that gets all of the awards or gets like the big money or whatever. I do wish that more publishers would take a chance on poetry, but like I'm more interested in kind of the freedom of indie publishing and stuff like that. Like, Penguin or something like that isn't really going to publish poetry, and if it did, it would probably be if Taylor Swift decided to do like a poetry book, which is fine, and I would get it and I would read it. I am somewhat of a Swiftie. No, she's bad, but let's not get into that. But she's got some good songs. I think we can all agree. But yeah, it's a sort of thing where. Yeah, I like the fact that poetry feels very non-commercial to me and difficult to sort of commodify. That being said, because it's a shorter form of writing, I feel like it would appeal to a lot of people whose attention spans are a little bit fucked. So that is my feeling on the question that I remember.
Yeah. I don't remember what it is either, so that's okay. Talking of Taylor Swift, I once wrote a poem that had the line, "Dreams are slow, not Taylor Swift." I can't believe I got away with that. Cameron, did you have anything to add on this?
I too have forgotten the original question. I think poetry is not a homogenous thing. So sure, you can talk about the decline of poetry being published in mainstream forums, like it used to be in The Age each week. It used to be in The Australian each week. It used to be in a lot of places. That poetry may not be as visible, but slam poetry has gone gangbusters. I don't see it as being a one sort of the decline of poetry. Maybe it's rising in other areas. Maybe it's filtering through society in other ways. I mean, poetry is language after all. We all use language. So that's my take on it.
I was just going to say there was a quote today I read by Spencer Creece where he said poetry is indestructible. And I thought that was that just really resonated with me.
Yeah, that's nice and positive too, which is nice.
Well, that picks up on, and many people here are probably familiar with the poem, Auden's great poem, The Elegy for Yeats. Where most people are probably familiar with the line, poetry makes nothing happen. But the poem doesn't actually ultimately articulate that. And I like the line where it notes poetry is a mouth, a way of happening. And that way of happening will continue happening, I think, because we all live in language.
Yeah, it's beautifully put. I guess getting back to pragmatics, I mean, I think you're right, in as much as, in a sense, what we're saying is that poetry is potentially just an indestructible vernacular force that people will do regardless of what the market forces or even what's happening, in education or what have you. But I do feel though that actually education does play a very important role, because it is easy for cultural practices, however apparently indestructible they are, and maybe I'm talking about certain articulations of poetry rather than others, but it is possible for things to wither and die as well, without some kind of attention. Now, there are different types of education. I'm not just talking about formal state education. I mean, do you feel, any of the poets here, that that there are things that could be happening in that space, either formally or informally, in terms of educating people? Because I think a lot of people, and I'm thinking now about how often people say to me, "Oh, I'm scared of poetry, I don't understand what it means." I even hear that from school teachers, and this may be one of the reasons why teaching of poetry at school seems to be on the decline, although teaching music is on the decline as well. I mean, I think I'm talking a lot, sorry about this, but I just to get on my soapbox for a minute, it's concerning that the arts and education are in the position that they are. But is there anything that could be going on? Are we able to look at different organisations, Red Room Poetry, for instance, as ways of plugging gaps when it comes to education? Does anyone have any opinions about this? Or data?
I really like a project they run in Ireland where they have senior secondary students compete to present a well-known poem, one that they've chosen, not one they've written themselves, but they present, really classical, really well-known poets. But it's an actual competition, and they stand up and they recite it off by heart. And you go to YouTube, you can look it up, and they're absolutely brilliant. And I think that kind of thing, I could imagine the library holding a competition like that and inviting young people to present poetry. It doesn't have to be your own. It can be Alden, or it can be one of your favourite poets. I think those kind of community events is one thing that would increase the exposure and increase the enjoyment. It's just one off the top of my head.
That's a good one. Yeah. Anything else?
I think we should be scared of poetry. I know you said teachers are scared. I think poetry should be feared. You also, it's insidious. I think one cool method of sharing poetry would be to use AI to generate like thousands of dating profiles, and in all of those swipes just pop a poem of hope there for those lonely nights of swiping.
That's a great idea.
I think new methods, new ways of integrating poems into people's lives when they're at a real all-time low.
I actually really like that, and I will say that in the Sapphic community, there's an app called Lex where it's kind of like old-timey classified ads, and people often do get really poetic with it. So I think like you definitely are onto something, and the lesbians know it.
Terrific. Cameron?
I've forgotten the question again.
Don't worry about it. I'll move on to my last question, which is much more personal, which is really just to round off this, what I think has been a terrific discussion. Just personally, in terms of the future of poetry, it could be at an individual level or at a global level, I don't care, but what sort of things are you looking for, hoping for? What do you want to be in the future of poetry? Maybe we'll start at that end and move our way down.
Start with me?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Future of poetry.
As in what you want.
Yes.
What you're looking forward to or hoping for.
Yeah, I think sometimes when people get sort of a bit hung up on whether or not they understand poetry, it's like, what does it even mean to understand a thing? And I think what I feel is when I enjoy a poem, it's often purely based on like vibes and purely based on reading a lot of poetry and kind of figuring out what I like. So that's a bit tangential. Maybe that answered the other question, which I don't remember. But I think that my head is a little bit empty. No, the future of poetry. Here it is. Buckle up. I think that it's so important. I really like poetry that says something about the world, even if it's like a poem about a tree. I think that when people try to be neutral on things or sort of be a bit apolitical, in my opinion, often that is saying something in what like they're not saying. And I think something really interesting about poetry is it's kind of steeped in your context and the time that you're alive and the things that are happening. And I really appreciate poems that sort of draw in all of those things and like accept that it's kind of a part of the world rather than trying to be this thing that is like a solo artistic practice. It's kind of like we're all in conversation with each other. This isn't really answering the question, but I guess I'm just saying like, and especially going back to thinking about before about like marginalized poets, there are so many voices out there and they all sound and look and feel so different, like out loud and on the page. And I think that's so exciting. And yeah, I think even when I feel like I don't understand a poem, often I'll take something away for it or it'll stick with me. And sometimes I just like something and that can be better than understanding it. So yeah, I think accepting that I'm a bit of a bimbo and I don't always understand poems, but I also like writing them and that is okay. And I want more people to be able to like tap into the fact that they can also write a poem. Like it's not a, you don't have to have some sort of level of education or anything like that. I think the most interesting poems often come from people who are not the ones who are getting their book published and stuff like that. So I think it's really important to listen to, yeah, the poets that are in the community and like, yeah, on the ground. I don't know, I'm really sorry for the way that I said all of that. Thank you.
No, please don't apologise. Thank you. Joshua.
I was just imagining a dystopian future of poetry in my head. I think street preachers doing poems would be kind of cool. I think like a crossover between drag and poetry would be really interesting. I'd love to see more of what Greg Machine's doing, where he's printing zines and posting them to random people's addresses in Australia. I'd love to see people gathering in houses around dinner sharing poems. I think the future's looking bright and I'm here for it.
I also want to see those things.
Cameron, can you be that bright?
No. But I think when you pose the question, what is the future of poetry, there's...
For you, I'm just talking about you. What do you want? What are you looking forward to?
Well, yeah, I was going to say that it...
Sorry, you
it
say whatever
sounds,
you want.
It sounds negative, that there's some reason to be pessimistic about it. And I don't really feel that. I think poetry, for me anyway, I think it will keep doing what it has probably always done, and articulating something crucial about human experience, whatever that response might be. Now, that might be doing what Joshua was suggesting. I think poetry is going to do amazing things in the future.
Good, we're all upbeat. Are you upbeat?
Oh, yeah, I totally agree with that. Personally, what I want is to keep learning and keep growing as a poet, to be a better poet. What I want for the future of poetry is really, just everything that's been said, and I think I'd sum it up by just community. I'd like to see a poetry community like tonight, like everyone here tonight. We all love poetry. I mean, you wouldn't be here otherwise unless it's one of these people you love, but you probably read their poetry. I hope you do. So yeah, just community, finding meaning, enjoying life. Poetry's beautiful. Even the really sad stuff is beautiful. So finding the beauty and finding the meaning.
Yeah, that's, I think, a lovely place to end this particular part of the evening. Thank you for everything tonight from these four wonderful people. We're going to see something else of the future of poetry after the break, which is the announcement of the Local Word Poetry Prize. Before that, the immediate future for you is food and drink. But before that, I'd like you to please put your hands together for these wonderful people. Thank you very much. All right. Thank you very much for making your way back here. This is the second part of tonight's program, which is the local word poetry prize reading, and we will of course announce the winner as well. So I had the pleasure of co-judging the local word writing prize with Vanessa Schoeneko and Charlotte Guest, who is in the audience somewhere. I don't know where she's gone. There she is, Charlotte, recently back from Varuna. We met online to select the short list of entries from a long list of 21, which had been selected from an incredible 599 entries. Didn't quite get the 600, but very impressive, very impressive. And the four shortlisted works, as you will, I'm sure, agree when you hear them, are compelling instances of contemporary poetry, and tonight we will be lucky enough to hear them read by the authors themselves. Two are joining us on the screens and two are here with us this evening. So I will begin by introducing a video from Jenny Pollock reading her piece, My Little Go-Betweens. And we've got little descriptions of the poems from the judge's report, which I'll just read from. So the report on My Little Go-Betweens reads, "This impressive free verse poem is a fresh and invigorating contribution to the popular genre of nature poetry. Many of the couplets could stand alone as powerful miniature works, and the cumulative effect is of a poem that demands to be revisited many times over. A strong spiritual impulse drives the writing and further elevates the piece, urging the reader to listen more closely to the divinity of trees, ants, cormorants, leaves." So cue the video.
Hi, my name is Jenny Pollock and I'm really delighted to have been shortlisted for Geelong Regional Library's Local Word Poetry Prize. So I'd like to read for you from my poem, My Little Go-Betweens. My little go-betweens, which is what I call the cormorants who are the most like the angels. Gods are born every day and no one is listening. The winged ant climbing a mountain knows many things we will never understand. The cowrie has the smoothest lips imaginable. When you're tapped twice on the shoulder by the same tree, the tree is telling you to look up. If a leaf falls into the middle of the poem, the only thing to do is to say yes. Talking to yourself is okay, with the ant as a witness, and the sea getting closer every minute. Someone says, saddle the horses. Someone else keeps shouting, are we there yet? The shadow of the ant is stretched out so long, it's ecstatic. There is a moment when each cormorant disappears, when it rises and runs as it takes off, when every one of its footsteps come towards you in puffs of light, a perfect sentence you spend all morning trying to transcribe. The leaves of the coral tree float on the ocean like soft brown boats on the blue eye of heaven. Today the river is showing me how the moon has unhinged the branches. Even a body can be born shorewards. Whatever is floating towards me, make it worthy of Christmas. The earth is tired of turning the other cheek. I thank heaven for oysters with their shut throats. I thank heaven many times over for rocks. If Jesus were here, he'd have to repeat everything he's already told us. Out on the boat, the cormorant stretches its wings as if it could hold them forever. It's not the first time I've compared the pied cormorant to the figure of Christ, when the cormorant vanishes and reappears somewhere else entirely. Nothing is the same. The flowers keep giving and giving. How else to explain so many butterflies returning so many times to the same flower? When the trees beneath which we are sitting finally succumb, there will be no more singing. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. I'd like to introduce a video from Wang Pham reading his poem Son Mai. Ekphrastic poetry takes as its inspiration a work of art in another medium. In this piece, the poet compares two Vietnamese Son Mai lacquer paintings, one public and industrial, one private and refined, deftly capturing the genre and its historical import through its layering of imagery which glows as if likewise encased in a reflective surface. The rich hues of inheritance shine bright in this intensely lyrical poem. Cue this video.
Hello everyone, Wang Pham here. I'm delighted that one of my poems, Son Mai, has made a shortlisting. The word Son Mai itself is an actual art form that's very popular and culturally significant in Vietnam. I wish I had a photo or a Son Mai in the background to show you, but I'm at my house. There is one a Son Mai at my parents' house. It's a painting, a lacquer painting that's commonly found in a lot of Vietnamese households. It's made from a very long process. So they have typically a black background, and it's highly polished from a sap that's only found from from a tree from the northern Vietnam in the mountains, and they do many layers of the sap, and it ends up being a very glistening and very rich depiction of a typical Vietnamese landscape, which often depicts rice paddies, temples, rivers, and so forth. So here we go, this is the poem, Son Mai. Walking through the West End markets, I see a Son Mai lacquer painting of a paddy. Its polish rushed and industrial, glossy as a shallow pond doing its best to depict a sunset. And the bamboo shoots cast no shadows, keeping their distances. In my parents' house, panels glow under many layers of gay sun sap, from northern mountains shining like past lives. Leaves flow golden as a bright ribbon of river in the dream of a crane stepping out his dominion. Beside mother-of-pearl temples, two streams join hands as if in a chanting ceremony. Pagoda-shaped hats shade lotus flowers, deities blossoming their lines, set upon a higher place, among waters muddy. I see my ancestors washing their shadows, pursuing the days until the days are done. Bamboo stalks, tall as a memory of rebirth, reaching into light. At the West End markets, the painting wore a hurried gloss. I remember the first time I drew water from a well. My face peered down into ancient spirits, green and deep, like sermons of moss. It required work to draw water.
Thank you for that. We are now fortunate to be joined in person by Panda Wong, who will read her piece, Dank, and I've just belatedly realised I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce this word, Abecedarian, I'm guessing. The Abecedarian is an ancient poetic form that follows the order of the alphabet. This instance of the form is Dank because it concerns that most mythical of mammals, the whale. Dealing with extraordinary skill and inventiveness with the cetacean world and what humans have done to it, the poem magically embodies both gravity and a comic lightness. It is a moving reminder that, quote, bodies are monuments in motion, not money machines, end quote.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be reading on What a Wrong Land. Just want to recognise that sovereignty was never ceded, always was, always will be. Sorry, I got nervous and lost my Google Doc. Dank Abecedarian. Ambergris, glittering fist in the belly of a whale. Squid beak, saturated swirl concretion. Rancid pearl expelled into the ocean through defecation or death by gut theatrics. Even the stars wonder out loud. WTF is that? For just like us, stars barely know whales, their ribs, terrors, open maws. Glossed from living strata into taxonomy's humiliating flatness. Sperm whales are named after the ooze in their heads. Used in candles and creams and cloth. Ice cream scooped from the junk. A whale organ that focuses sound like a lens. Keeps the ocean's paths glowing with call and echo. And listen, heads are for dreams, not excavation. Bodies are monuments in motion, not money machines. But industry milks the ocean into mastitis. Perfume distills the question of a body into bottles. The ocean darkens in diminuendo. Remember when orcas revived an 80s trend of wearing dead salmon hats? Remember Kiska and Gladys and Tahlequah and Tilikum? Remember the orca uprising, rising up like the ocean? Underwater glows vivid with whale song, ancient exhales of yearning, from a time before cities and seismic blasts and plastic and zoos and alphabets. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. I'd now like to invite Linda Judge, our fourth and final shortlisted poet, to the stage to read her piece, Marketplace. This prose poem, which is also a dramatic monologue, brings together the vernacular voice and the ordinary act of selling something online in ways that are artful and entertaining. Ranging from bluntly straightforward to unexpectedly lyrical, Marketplace illustrates poetry's narrative potential with great richness, humour and subtlety. Linda.
Thank you. It's an honour to be here. Marketplace. The amp is beaten up. It came off the hard rubbish. I couldn't let it go to landfill, but I also knew I could get a buck for it. My neighbour is in hospital with a bleed. The red camellia drops another flower. The sound of recess is on school holidays. I miss the bell, which always plays the same song, Walking on Sunshine. I list some stuff and wait to see how long it takes to get a message. Is this still available? It always is, if I can find it. Yes, are you still interested? Footy finals sound like summer approaching. That empty feeling. You can tell Martin knows what it's like to be gone by the way he misses the kick. What a legend, though. The guy sits in the passenger seat of a silver Nissan while his carer checks out the amp. I attach a grey extension cord that winds down the stairs he doesn't do because of his disability. A snake trails over the couch grass, and I think about how good it's going to feel when I can delete the listing. She plays the same chord over and over, and we both listen. $20 used to feel like $1 million. The sound is real good, he says. Can you bring it over here? She picks up the box, and her pink shirt catches underneath laminate peeling from the sides. We both stare at the brown skin on her stomach. Nice and close, he tells her. Looks tatty. Are you negotiable at all? His legs are squeezed between the seat and the dash. Paper money so light, like falling leaves. I've got lots of interest, I lie. And a Neil Diamond song goes through my head. Shiloh, when I was young. The only record my mum owned, but I was the one who knew how to play it. He gives her a note and she passes it on to me. Still sticky, like an earworm.
Thank you. I'd now like to invite Vanessa back to help me present the prize winners for the local Word Poetry Prize. Welcome back. Yes, Vanessa has helpfully asked me to remember to tell you that we judged these these submissions anonymously. So in alphabetical order, I will now announce the 3 commended entries, each of which received $250 prize money. Congratulations to Linda Judge from Anglesey for her entry titled Marketplace. If you could come back up to the front here. Congratulations to Vong Pham from Queensland for his entry titled Son Mai. Unfortunately, he could not be with us here tonight. Congratulations to Jenny Pollock from New South Wales for her entry My Little Go-Betweens. And of course, Jenny could not be here either, but we will also applaud. Which, of course, leaves us only with 1 entry on the shortlist, which I'm very pleased to announce as the winner of this year's local Word Poetry Prize. And congratulations to Panda Wong from Melbourne. Panda receives first prize place money of $2,000, plus, I'm almost embarrassed to mention this because she clearly does not need it, a 1-hour mentoring session with a Deakin University writing practitioner. Congratulations again. All shortlisted entries will be published on the Geelong Regional Library's website tomorrow. Congratulations to everyone. Well done. I am now going to pass back to Vanessa. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, David. Really just the opportunity to say congratulations again to all the poets and to Charlotte and David. I'm a bit of a fraud on the panel. It's really your expertise as poets and your generosity of time. and David for going through 600 poems to create a fabulous shortlist. So everyone, please do thank David and Charlotte for their assistance. And lovely to have you here, Charlotte. I wasn't sure you were going to make it, so it's great to see you here. And of course to our panel earlier in the evening, thank you to the poets. It was really just engaging to hear different points of view and to hear different poems and different poets. So a fabulous night, and thanks to the Geelong Regional Libraries team for helping us make it a special night. Thanks everyone, and hope to see you next year.